Washington, D.C. didn't always look like the city we know today. Long before its marble monuments and broad avenues were finished, it was a place still finding its identity. Early maps, engravings, and paintings show a capital built from bold ideas, but shaped by constant change. In this video, we step back into those early years and watch the city grow. Each image captures a moment when Washington was taking shape, piece by piece, out of ambition and uncertainty. This engraving shows Washington at a moment when the city was more idea than reality. You can see how empty the landscape still was. A long, straight road cuts toward a small cluster of buildings that would eventually become the heart of the capital. Most of what surrounds it is open land, scattered houses, and young poplar trees planted to mark the path toward Pennsylvania Avenue. It feels quiet, almost rural. Hard to believe this place would grow into the center of national power. In 1800, it was still a rough start, full of hope, but far from finished. The Eisenhower Executive Office building looks almost unreal in this old engraving. It rises like a giant stone fortress dressed in French Second Empire style. Sharp roofs, heavy ornament, endless windows. When it was completed in the late 1800s, it was the largest office building in the world, and you can feel that ambition in the scale of it. This scene captures one of the darkest days in early Washington. After winning the Battle of Bladensburg in 1814, British troops marched straight into the capital. This painting shows Washington in 1833, long before the city filled in its empty spaces. You're looking at it from across the Anacostia River, where the hills still feel rural and untouched. The capital stands on the horizon, bright and heavy, almost floating over the landscape. The White House sits to the left, drawn a bit larger than life to balance the scene. The Navy Yard and small clusters of buildings stretch along the water. Sailing ships move slowly across the river, and the whole city feels young, wide open, and still deciding what it will become. This view of Camp Fry in 1863 shows Washington in the middle of the Civil War, but the scene feels surprisingly calm from above. Rows of barracks line the open grounds, neat and orderly, almost like a small town built inside the capital. Soldiers gather in formation along the main parade route. This 1888 bird's-eye view shows Washington at a moment when the city finally starts to look like the capital we know. The Washington Monument rises clean and bright at the center, surrounded by a landscape that feels carefully designed. Curved paths, man-made lakes, and wide lawns stretch toward the Potomac. The city beyond is dense and organized, with government buildings anchoring the horizon. The whole scene gives the impression of a capital coming into its own, confident and planned. You can see how the quiet, scattered Washington of earlier decades is giving way to something larger and more intentional. This view of Brown's Indian Queen Hotel shows Washington when it was still more town than capital. The building stretches across Pennsylvania Avenue with a clean, symmetrical facade, framed by young trees and steady foot traffic. Carriages pause at the curb, and people move in and out with an easy rhythm that suggests the hotel was a natural meeting point. It feels like one of those places where travelers, politicians, and locals all cross paths without much ceremony. You can sense a city still finding itself, but already full of small hubs like this that held daily life together. This photograph captures the capital in a moment of transition, with the new dome still rising behind Lincoln as he prepared to take office. The scaffolding gives the building an unfinished look, almost like the country itself in early 1861. The trees are bare, the sky is flat, and everything feels a little tense and uncertain. You can imagine people walking past, aware that change was coming, but not fully ready for what the next months would bring. The half-built dome stands there as a quiet reminder that the nation was about to be tested in ways no one could predict. This early view of the capital shows Washington still taking shape. The landscape feels open and unfinished, with a dirt road curving toward the building and a few scattered trees breaking up the horizon. The capital itself looks smaller than we imagine it today, almost restrained, but already carrying the weight of its new role. You can see carriages gathered out front and people moving around with a sense of purpose, as if they're adjusting to a city that is only beginning to find its identity. It's a snapshot of a capital that was still more idea than reality. This photograph captures the capital long before its familiar white dome took over the skyline. In 1846, the building still carried its old copper dome, a round, almost modest shape compared to the towering structure we know today. The scene feels quiet, with rows of young trees framing the grounds. This 1846 photograph shows the White House at a time when it still felt more like a quiet residence than the center of national politics. The building looks familiar, but the surroundings feel open and almost rural, with bare trees and soft winter light settling over the lawn. The image carries a calm that's hard to imagine today. There are no crowds, no security barriers, just a simple view of the president's home standing in the cold. You can sense how young the country still was, and how Washington was still shaping the identity that would define it in the years ahead. This photograph shows Ford's Theater in 1865, draped in mourning after Lincoln's assassination. The scene feels strangely quiet. The building looks almost unchanged from today, but the heavy black bunting reminds you of how fresh the shock was. People stand near the entrance, not in crowds, but in small groups, as if unsure what to do next. It captures a moment when Washington was trying to steady itself after losing a president in the most violent way possible. You can sense the weight of that day in the stillness of the street and the plain brick walls of the theater. This photo shows Washington in the mid-19th century, when the city still felt more like a work in progress than a capital. The unfinished Capitol dome rises in the distance, already commanding the landscape even though construction was far from done. In the foreground, a Gothic church stands tall beside scattered wooden buildings and dirt roads. The scene has a rough, almost rural feel, but you can see the city starting to take shape. It's a moment when Washington was growing fast, balancing its early improvised buildings with the big plans that would define its future. Thanks for taking this walk through early Washington, D.C. These old views remind us how young the city really is, and how much work, struggle, and imagination went into building it. The capital didn't appear fully formed. It grew slowly, shaped by politics, war, and the people who lived and worked here long before it became a symbol known around the world. If you enjoyed this look back, stay connected. There are many more cities and stories worth revisiting, one image at a time.